Okay, clear for takeoff. This your handbook for becoming a private pilot. This is chapter one, part six. We left at the beginning of 1-18. So chapter one, part six, is clear for takeoff. Your handbook for becoming a private pilot. This is um, Skyhawk, the Skyhawk plane. It's four seats, four passengers on those seats, and basically we left off in the middle uh, turns. So we didn't complete turns, and that is where we ended the video. Started to read turns, carried on to the next page, 1-18, and we stopped right there. So we gotta carry on from here. And we're just reading these, so we're not really getting too much into them. So we might not remember too much of it, but I think it's good that we read things like this because it adds to, first of all, it adds to our vocabulary, and also it adds to our learning capacity. Uh, since they're not just stories, they're actual uh, learning how to do things. In this case, how to fly this plane and things about the plane. And things and what to do in certain situations and uh, using the flight computer. This is way in the middle of the book, stuff like that. I have flipped through these pages and I have read titles, um, but I have not read word by word. Tracking the radio. We're going to learn what a radio is. It's not saying radio, it's saying radio, RADIAL. And so wax, we're going to learn what wax is, flight law, containment, weather brief, final search. This is planning and decisions for your cross country flights. So we're learning about flying cross country and all these things, using everything in the cockpit, basic weather theory. There's a lot of things. Flying cross country at night, printer reports and forecasts, airplane loading, performance, predicting performance, making decisions that lead to desirable results, emergencies in flight. It's a lot of things. VFR, aeronautics chart, plural is charts, aeronautics charts, VFR, aeronautical charts, alphabet soup. It's a lot of things in takeoffs and landings. So all these things are based on this one small plane, the Skyhawk. So we're just going to pick that up 1-18 and continue finish that to turn the turns, we're on turns, turning, and we're just going to carry that from here on. So let's read. To turn, raise the wing and look for traffic. Rotate the control wheel, add rudder, add back pressure, and then neutralize ailerons and rudder. To stop to stop the turn, just use the opposite control inputs. Move the control wheel to the right, which deflects the ailerons to roll the wings level. You use right rudder as needed to keep the nose from yawing in the opposite direction. When the wings are level, bring the control wheel to neutral and release the back pressure, and the airplane will stop turning. Descents. The next thing you can do with an airplane is make a descent. The best way to make a descent is first reduce the power smoothly by pulling back on the throttle. Let's say you reduce the power by 500 RPM. I forgot to look up RPM to 1700 RPM. I'm guessing low is high and high is low because it says reduce the power from 500 RPM to 1700 RPM. Remember that since you use right rudder when you added power to climb to keep the nose from turning left, you have to use left rudder when you decrease power to keep the nose from turning right. So we're talking in terms of increase and decrease. On positive, like a battery, left is negative and right is positive. A battery originally was standing up, so the left was the bottom of the battery, which is the negative side. Typically, it um, was zinc is at the bottom of the battery. Where there, you notice the AAA batteries, it has a little bump on one side. That's the negative side, and then where there's no bump, that's the positive side. And then usually, back in the day, they used to stack up zinc at the bottom, and they're called units. The zinc at the bottom and copper at the top, both together as one unit. And in between, there's a cloth, a wet cloth, typically with salt and water, and that allows the current to flow through the copper and the zinc, and that is called one unit. And batteries are made up of a lot of units depending on how much power you want for your battery. And so they used to stack them up. Basically, they will make coins of various sizes, and they'll stack them up. They would usually like one and a half inches coins. They'll just stack them up per unit. Zinc on top of copper, and then between the zinc and copper, there's a wet cloth, and then they'll do that. That's one unit, and then do a bunch of units over and over the same way. And then the zinc is the negative at the bottom, and the copper is the positive at the top. So the same principle applies here. Um, the negative is the left, and the positive is the right. I think it's almost um, common sense. I would suppose that the right is positive and the left is negative. Uh, let's see. You have to use left rudder when you decrease power to keep the nose from turning right. Keep the nose level until the airspeed decreases to a good approach speed, say about 75 knots. Then just relax. Then just relax some of the control wheel pressure and let the nose drop below the horizon to establish a good glide attitude. The, the more you lower the nose, the faster your glide speed will be. Put the nose at an attitude that'll give you, say, about 75 knots. You'll get used to this with practice. I wasn't, I don't remember where to read the knots. Maybe we'll look at that later. Totally forgot. Now, some of these things could be on on the DVD because the book came with the DVD. But when I tried the DVD, it wasn't working. So I'm stuck with the book itself. There might be a video on the tube about it. Check it out. Maybe you might find it. Clear for Takeoff DVD. They might give you a better option for it, or just even Clear for Takeoff handbook. They might give you somebody out there might have it in more completed form than I do. So you can check that one out if you're interested. Okay, to descend. Reduce power, add left rudder, relax the control wheel pressure, let the nose drop. Controlling your airplane in motion. So, see, the whole chapter is called Controlling Your, no, okay. So, controlling your airplane in motion. Straight and level. Let's just read this blue box here first. I don't know what to call those. I don't know if they're sign notes or these on the side of the pages. I haven't been reading them. They're legends and lores. They don't make much sense to me. I might read them. I might just read them just because. Okay, so let's read what's in the blue box here. People always want to know what happens when the engine quits. Well, the answer is not much. To demonstrate this, you can slowly bring the throttle back all the way to idle, and all that happens is that you descend faster. The airplane is still completely controllable. In fact, this is what you do to land an airplane if you are making a long descent, more than just 200 feet or so. Now, I don't actually understand what they're trying to say. I guess they're saying that you can just uh, feel safe enough to where you can land the plane even if it turns off on you. Um, but 200 feet or so, it's a little discouraging. What if you don't have 200 feet? Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Uh, you want, but I don't. Anyway, you want to look for other airplanes in the area in front and below you by making shallow turns to the left and right, just enough to see past the nose. Now, as you reach the altitude where you want to level off, just bring the throttle back to about 2200 RPM for cruise and adjust pitch for a level flight attitude. And remember, at 75 knots, you need to add right rudder until the speed increases. This is a lot to remember, especially if you're actually going to fly the plane. So when you're studying to learn something, you actually have to go back. For example, right now, uh, the right rudder until speed increases to 75 knots. That I will have to go back and check out what 75 knots is, or use my phone um, to ask Google about it and things like that. But that's the actual studying where you're going to pass a test, things like that. In our case, we're just reading because we want to find out what's in the book um, by words, um, audible words, and we want to work on our pronunciation for these words. So we're going to read various different topics, and we're going to read encyclopedias as well. Also, we're going to be reading Bible verses, chapters. So I just uploaded the seventh chapter of Genesis. And it's about the flood with Noah. So we're going to be doing that as well, just to find out what's inside and for our pronunciation as well. It's basically everything is for pronunciation and the knowledge that's inside the books. We're not reading for passing the test because that's a whole different game than just reading the book and pronouncing the words. And it might be a little bit more difficult for us, and we never really got used to passing the test thing. So that's something that I might get used to it as I improve and retaining the information within the book. But that may be a thing of improvement as we go. So let's just keep going here. We got straight and level, and we'll just read that and keep going. I don't know when we're gonna stop. We have 15 minutes on the clock, and we have about 1 hour max per video for now. So let's see what it says here. Straight and level. The most important thing you can do with an airplane is the most subtle of all: straight and level flight. Straight flight means the airplane is not turning. Level flight means level altitude flight. The airplane is neither climbing nor descending. The secret to flying straight is to pick out a distant point in the direction that you want to fly and keep the airplane headed toward it. If you see that point move, if you see that point move to the right of its original position on your windscreen, then you will need to make a small turn to the right to put it back. It's not much different than it was keeping your car pointed down the road when you were learning to drive. Look at one side and then the other to compare the distance between each wingtip and the horizon. If they are both the same, then you have the wings level, the airplane is not turning, and you are flying straight. I don't know what they mean by horizon. I guess they're just saying in front of you. The secret to keeping the airplane level at one altitude is to keep the airplane's nose at the same position with the horizon. You can figure out what the position is by experimenting. Soon it will be automatic for you. The bottom of the wings can also help with straight and level. Look to either side and compare the angle. The bottom of the Look to either side and compare the angle. The bottom of the wing makes with the horizon. This this will give you another level altitude flight cue. Let's read the legends and lore. I don't know what lore is, but we'll keep reading. While straight and level may seem impossible at first, it really it's not. In fact, your Skyhawk, like most light aircraft, is designed to make it easy. The engineers have even given it a fancy name: positive static long, 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 longitudinal stability. Longitudinal stability. Unlike many first airplanes, many of which were inherently unstable, the wings and stabilizers of light airplanes are designed and built so that an airplane will return to stabilized flight by itself. So they call it positive static longitudinal stability. Unlike many first airplanes, many of which were inherently unstable, The wings and stabilizer of light airplanes are designed and built so that an airplane will return to stabilized flight by itself. That's very good. So, to fly straight and level, pick out a distant point and fly towards it. Keep the nose at the same relative position on the horizon. Keeping the airplane straight and level really is a continuous chain of corrections. You see a change in one direction, so you make a correction in the other. After a while, you won't even notice that you are making them. I guess kind of like the right rudder and left rudder. How an airplane tries to fly straight and level on its own. So that's what they're calling the longitudinal stability. How an airplane tries to fly straight and level on its own. Control movements require control movements require and how to hold the control wheel. Often people imagine that it takes strength to fly an airplane. In reality, flying an airplane is a delicate thing, a thing of grace and beauty. In fact, rather than you ever driven um, or just barely holding the gas pedal on your car, where you're not utilizing more energy than necessary for the speed that you're going. That's that's the grace and beauty, the ease, the thing of the delicacy, or the thing of grace and beauty that they're talking about, as far as I can understand it, where you do just enough for that particular speed. In fact, rather than also with the brakes, when you do when you're driving at just enough speed to keep the limit on the road, that gives you enough time to slow down without brakes as you're approaching a stop sign or even a red light, so you won't have to brake too fast or speed up too fast. Um, that's more noticeable in cars that are manual when you're changing gears. Rather than thinking of movement of the controls, think of applying pressure to the control wheel and rudder pedals. Only in the movies do you see the wheel move a lot. If you see it move much at all in normal flight, you're probably moving it too much. The best way to hold the control wheel is with one hand. In fact, just use your fingertips rather than your whole hand. It's almost like you're driving a car with power steering. Your other hand is used to operate the engine controls, such as the throttle. If you have to hold much pressure on the wheel to make the airplane do what you want it to do, you probably need to use trim. Trim. Think of trim as your invisible co pilot. To get help from the trim, first use the control wheel to set the airplane's level pitch attitude. That sight picture that you're working so hard on developing. Sight picture. Then feel the pressure on the control wheel. If you are pushing forward on the control wheel to keep your desired attitude, slowly roll the trim wheel forward. Rotate it upward. Rotate it upward. Think of the airplane's nose as being attached to the opposite side of the trim wheel. You want the trim to help you push the nose down, and you have to roll the trim wheel forward to do that. When you start feeling pressure from the control wheel, stop trimming. If, on the other hand, you are now using pressure to hold the nose up to maintain your desired attitude, what we call holding back pressure, roll the trim wheel backward. But please don't make the common mistake of becoming so enamored. I guess they're saying don't use trim too much. The trim wheel, like you try to use trim to set the level flight attitude instead of using the control wheel. Okay, so don't use trim too much if it can be done in other ways. Trim has too much lag to fly smoothly and precisely. So I guess trim is an emergency thing. That's why I say an invisible co-pilot when you need help for assistance. Look, man, no hands. Here's another thing that might surprise you. In an automobile, the driver has to pay attention and have his hands on the wheel at all times. But in airplanes, pilots can remove their hands and feet from the controls for short periods of time, and the airplane will continue to fly straight and level on its own. This characteristic is designed into the airplane and it's called stability. I think that's what the law was talking about, but they didn't say it's called stability. Oh, okay, stability, but longitudinal stability. Positive static longitudinal stability keeps the plane stabilized and flies by itself. So we can just call it stability. But what happens if you hit a hump? If you if you hit a bump in the road, in the air, and we call this turbulence. Stability works even for those bumps. Let's suppose you're in level flight. You pull back on the control wheel, causing the nose to pitch up, and then let go. What do you think will happen? The nose drops a little below the level altitude position and then comes back up, but to a lesser amount than before. After a few slight up and down oscillations like this, the airplane will return to level flight. So that's the stability when there's turbulence. I think what you've just learned is that the airplane often can fly better than the pilot, and you'll continue to learn this lesson as long as you continue to fly. Light airplanes are designed to keep flying, despite all that we do to try to stop them. When a flight is over, parking, the landing is successful and you taxi back to the ramp. What comes next? Taxi back to the ramp. That's what they call when you're driving a plane, when you're moving a plane on the ground, call it taxiing. Shutdown. Once you're back at your parking spot, you'll use the securing airplane checklist to shut down your airplane. You'll find that some pilots don't set the parking brake when they are sure that the airplane won't roll and they're planning to tie down the airplane and choke the wheel. When they're You'll find that some pilots don't set the parking brake when they are sure that the airplane won't roll and also again they're also planning to tie down the airplane and choke the wheel. I remember reading about um, the choke part, but I don't know if it has its own title. It's gonna be somewhere in part anywhere anywhere in between part one and part five. But I think it's probably part one. Um, but, I guess it was. Well, it has to be somewhere near here because I remember covering that choke part uh, when you're when you're getting into the plane and getting ready to take off. It must have been covered somewhere. Anyway, but if you choose to, you set the parking brake by pressing on both of the brakes at the top of the rudder pedal, and while holding pressure against them, pulling the parking brake handle, then rotating it 90 degrees down. This is a lot to remember. If you read it and visualize uh, being inside the plane and remember where the rudder is or the, the rudder pedals and all these things, um, it's easier to understand what they're saying when you visualize it. When you shut down the engine, the checklist you turn turn off has you turn off the avionics power switch. First, to protect the avionics equipment from a possible power surge. It also has you turn off all other electrical equipment to reduce the battery load until the master switch is turned off. However, as a signal that your prop is turning, you should leave the rotating beacon and navigation lights at night on until the engine has stopped. Just as at the beginning of the pre-flight, before you get out of the cockpit, check that list. Let's see. Just as the beginning of the pre-flight. Oh, okay, you gotta check off the list at the beginning of the flight and at the end of the flight of the pre-flight. Before you get out of the cockpit, check that. Yes, I'm saying check the list. The ignition, check that the ignition switch is in the off position. The mixture control is at the idle cutoff. The throttle is closed and the master switch is off. Moving your airplane by hand. Often you'll have to put your Skyhawk into its parking spot by hand. and it's relatively easy to move on a level surface. You use the tow bar to steer the nose wheel, and if additional force is necessary, push or pull on the wing struts. Don't push on the ends of the prop, the spinner, cowling, or tail. Those parts may be damaged by pushing. Securing, securing. You tie airplanes down after flight in case a strong wind comes along. You really don't want the airplane to fly without you. Post-flight inspections. I think very soon, uh, by 2030, hopefully, we start seeing more automatic things, takeoff and landings and just automatic mechanical objects, things. Um, just your everyday machinery will all be automatic, hopefully, so we can have a little bit more safety in those in that area pertaining to the pilot is not there, or um, maybe you're not up to driving or something. Post-flight inspection. Take a final careful look over your airplane before you leave it, and then write down and report any discrepancies that you have found during or after your flight. And just before you walk away, pat its nose and whisper that you'll never make a hard landing again. If it will, just be patient with you a little while longer. I want to read that again. Take a post-flight inspection. Take a final careful look over your airplane before you leave it. Then write down and report any discrepancy that you have found during or after your flight. And just before you walk away, pat its nose and whisper that you'll never make a hard landing again. If it will, just be patient with you a little while longer. So you have to always be mindful and grateful that you're able to fly peacefully. That you have that ability of flying peacefully. That the airplane, in other words, I think they're letting us know here in this book that you have to be very grateful that the plane works. Be very grateful that everything's working. Everything seems to be going okay, and I guess gratitude is just a very important thing. Okay, figure 2-1. 2-1. The four forces acting on an airplane in flight are thrust, drag, lift, and weight. In steady, unaccelerated flight, drag is equal to thrust and lift is equal to weight. In steady, unaccelerated flight, unaccelerated flight is called drag, and drag is equal to thrust in accelerated flight and unaccelerated flight. So you're not doing much. So drag is thrust, and lift is equal to weight. Lift is equal to weight. Huh. In this chapter, this is we're here at chapter 2. We might leave it here. Let's just read a little bit about it. In this chapter, why an airplane flies. Controlling an airplane in flight. So I think we're going to leave it here just to start off chapter 2 on the next video. And we might do clear for takeoff chapter 2 dash something. We might do the dash on the chapters instead of part 1, part 2, and 3. Clear for takeoff chapter 2 dash so and so dash so and so until we get to the end. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this video on Clear for Takeoff chapter 1 part 6, and we'll see you at the beginning of chapter 2 on our next video. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and don't forget to learn something new every day. Thank you, God bless you, and we'll see you in the next one.